Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com, and I am back yet again to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and a little bit of free agency. Today, I wanted to focus on wide receivers when it comes to free agency, and I actually have a short list of wide receivers that I would like to see the Chiefs go for this offseason to try and find that legitimate third option that can scare defenses and be the difference in a playoff game, like the Cincinnati Bengals AFC Championship. I feel like if the Chiefs had, just one other receiver, one other pass catcher that could actually make a difference, they would have won that game. Like, if OBJ had chose the Chiefs whenever he was cut by the Cleveland Browns halfway through the season, I think the Chiefs win that game. I think OBJ could have been the difference. You don't think OBJ could have been a 3-point difference? I mean, that's just how I feel. I think the Chiefs need to attack wide receiver too. They tried last offseason. They failed. They didn't get anyone. They rolled out Pringle, Josh Gordon, McCole Hardman, and those guys were good in spurts, and they all put together good football here and there, but they're role players that, do their role pretty well for the most part, but you still need that third guy. Because those names I mentioned aren't always going to be reliable, and there were definitely games this past season where they weren't reliable, or they dropped easy passes, or etc. Now, I know a lot of people in the comments are going to say, we need defense, we got to get a defensive end, we don't need to be spending money on wide receiver. And I think you guys might be misunderstanding how much space and how much room the Chiefs are going to have to work with this offseason. They're going to be able to address both. They can address receiver and they can address the defense in the same free agency class. I promise you that. Like, they can still do both, and even if they don't do both in free agency, if you address wide receiver in free agency, then you can just take every single draft pick you have and use it on the defense. I mean, that you could still do that. Or they could sign a receiver and draft one in the top 100. I'm sure a lot of people would be upset with that. But don't be entirely surprised if that is a route the Chiefs go. I think, they are not scared to add weapons on top of weapons. And there are a lot of receivers that I like in this upcoming draft. But, before I get too off track, I will stick it with free agent wide receivers because that's the point of this video. And I kind of explained at the beginning why the Chiefs need a third receiver, why they need a third option. They sorely lacked one all season long. And, one of the reasons that, I still hold some frustration for Veach is because for the second straight offseason now, you have glaring holes at positions that a lot of fans have been calling for. You have wide receiver 2 as one of them. I mean, this is something that, you really should have fixed last offseason and you didn't. And I understand he tried and you can't force guys to say yes and sign with you. But it seems pretty customary to have a backup plan when plan A or even plan B falls through. Especially when you're in this Super Bowl window right now. I'll actually probably have a future video where I talk about more of that because it goes outside of wide receivers. But again, we'll stick to the wide receivers. So I've been rambling since the start of the video, so let's just get into the list. What receivers would I like to see the Chiefs go after this offseason, or who do I think the Chiefs have the best shot of signing? I am fairly confident that the Chiefs will sign a wide receiver in free agency. Brett Veach talked about the impact of having a receiver in the offseason in his press conference and wanting to find more weapons for Patrick Mahomes and all that. Obviously, he said the priority is the defense, but again, they're not going to shy away from adding someone to this offense. And I am not entirely sure who the Chiefs are going to go out and get, but I'm also pretty confident that whoever they sign is likely going to be someone from this list of 4 that I have made. So I'm actually going to do this list from least likely to most likely, and the first one I have is Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson is the dream best case scenario at wide receiver. However, I think he's going to cost the most money of all the people on this list because he's still pretty young. He gets open extremely easily. He is a very good wide receiver that I think actually would fit this offense pretty well. There's a couple reasons why I think it won't happen, though. One, because it's just a little bit too much money, a little bit more than they're willing to spend. He just played on the franchise tag in Chicago. Like, he wants a long-term deal with a lot of financial security. At least I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Maybe he would be willing to take less, or maybe his market isn't as strong because he didn't have a fantastic season with Chicago. But at the same time, he has complained about the Matt Nagy offense. I don't think he enjoyed playing in Chicago very much. The offense there has always been terrible since he's been there. And, Matt Nagy learned a lot of his stuff under Andy Reid. So with Allen Robinson, even though he actually talked up Andy Reid on Twitter and seemed like he would enjoy playing for Kansas City, it's weird to me because Nagy took a lot of concepts from Reid, and, their offenses aren't extremely different. So why would Allen Robinson enjoy playing in KC so much more than he did in Chicago? I don't know. But I think he's an option. I think the Chiefs are looking at him. I think there's mutual interest on both sides, and we will just have to see. But I think he's the least likely of the four. Next, I have DJ Chark, the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver who is set to be a free agent this offseason. And I have debated between him and the next guy I'm going to mention after Chark about who is more likely. But Chark would probably be one of the cheaper ones on the list. I don't think he would cost too much to bring in. And I've always been a fan of DJ Chark. I loved him coming out of college. He was the fastest receiver in his draft class. He definitely fits the speed theme here in Kansas City. He's also bigger than I remember at 6'4", 200 pounds. That's pretty good size. Couple concerns I have about him. One, his injuries, they haven't been too bad, but he did just break his ankle this past season and only played in a few games and had 154 receiving yards on the season. And 2020 wasn't his best year either. He had a down year. He only had 53 receptions for 760 yards, which is still a fine season, but sure, he could come in here and compete for the wide receiver 2 spot, but I think there are options on this list that would be a better fit for the Chiefs offense. But I would not be mad about bringing in Chark at all because he's still pretty young too. He's one of the younger on the list. He's 25 years old still, and he does have pretty good size. And look, I loved him coming out of college. I wanted the Chiefs to draft him. I believe that was the 2018 draft, so that was the year they took Breeland Speaks. I'd much rather have DJ Chark than Breeland Speaks in hindsight, but yeah, I mean, coming off the injury and a decrease in production over the last few seasons, he may be relatively cheap to bring in, and I still like his upside. I still think there's upside there, and I think he's definitely better than McCole Hardman. I think he's better than Byron Pringle, so, if you can do it, I'm not going to complain. All right, next on the list, we got Odell Beckham Jr., a player that I think the Kansas City Chiefs were very close to signing when he was cut from the Cleveland Browns, and I think there's mutual interest. There was actually an article that came out that the Chiefs would be interested in OBJ. I don't think that's just a rumor. I think there is mutual interest from both sides, and Brett Veach even specifically mentioned OBJ in his press conference a couple weeks ago. The Chiefs know about him. I think they like him, and if they can get him at a reasonable deal, I think they'd bring him in here. And he's still an explosive player. He's not quite the athlete he was before the ACL injury, but look what he's doing for the Rams. If you had that in Kansas City, I'm telling you, if they had him, they would have beat the Bengals. They would be in the Super Bowl right now. I mean, you could make an argument that OBJ was the difference between a Super Bowl and not. Because if the Rams don't sign him, do we think the Rams are in the Super Bowl? I don't know, especially with the Robert Woods injury. I don't know if they would be where they are. I know one of the reasons people were wary about bringing OBJ in when he was a free agent over the regular season is that he was complaining about targets. His family was complaining about him not getting targets, and people are like, oh, there's not going to be targets in Kansas City behind Hill and Kelsey. That's a misconception. There are plenty of targets to go around beyond Kelsey and Hill. Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle this year combined for 101 targets, guys. If you could just give those to OBJ, could you imagine what this offense could do? And 100 targets is a substantial amount of targets. In an ideal world, OBJ would be going up against the other team's third best defensive back. And more times than not, I think Odell Beckham Jr. is destroying whoever the team's third best defensive back is. And we need more guys on this offense that can get open when guys like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are being bracketed. And you can't bracket all three of them. OBJ isn't the perennial 1,000-yard receiver that he used to be. I don't know, maybe he could be again sometime in his career. He has like 700 yards receiving this year, and that's even with him missing a couple games. So I don't think the drop-off in production is as big as people like to think it is. Like, he's still a very good receiver, very talented, very explosive, just not quite the athlete pre-ACL injury that he was. He's 29 years old, though, and I think he'll be a little bit pricey. We'll just have to see what his market looks like. He could end up staying with the Rams, depending on what happens. But I think the Chiefs are definitely going to keep tabs on him, and he'll be towards the top of their list if he does become a free agent and is willing to listen. Number 1 on my Chiefs wide receiver free agent wish list is JuJu SmithSchuster. I think JuJu SmithSchuster is by far the best option for a lot of reasons, and I think he's by far the most realistic. Number 1, I think he wants to be here. I think he realized he made a mistake not signing here last offseason. He wanted that one last ride with Ben Roethlisberger. He said the Chiefs were his number 2. Now that Ben Roethlisberger is gone and his last run with the Steelers didn't go all that well, I think he has his sights set on Kansas City, and I think he would be the perfect wide receiver too. He's the perfect fit for this offense out of all the guys because he's got good size. And he also has inside and outside versatility. He can play almost anywhere on the field. And I think he understands his role as a wide receiver, too. That's something you have to consider with a lot of these guys. If they don't get the targets that they want, a lot of them will complain and stuff like that. JuJu, no, he understands his role as a wide receiver, too. His production was also the best when he was playing under Antonio Brown when he was in Pittsburgh. You know, when Sammy Watkins is here, he said that he understood that he was second fiddle to Kelce and Hill, and that his job was to make life easier for those guys and get open when he needs to. JuJu SmithSchuster could slide into that role perfectly. Like, he's probably closest to Sammy Watkins of all the guys on this list, and he can get open fairly easily. He's a good route runner with underrated speed. People will get hung up on the TikTok and, oh my God, JuJu is a distraction. I don't really care about that. I care if he plays good football, and I think he's a good football player. I know he's coming off the shoulder injury, too, this past season. He only had 129 yards, played a few games before being out essentially the entire season. Came back for the playoff game against the Chiefs, but clearly wasn't 100%. The shoulder injury was actually a rarity, though. For the most part, he's been healthy. And shoulders are quite tricky because they don't get a lot of blood flow, so they take a long time to heal, and they can, you know, like I said, be pretty tricky to deal with. So props to him for actually making it back for the playoffs. But I also think he's going to be relatively cheap. If you could pay him somewhere around $8 million per year on like a multi-year deal, that's perfect, man. Like, that's not sinking too much money into the wide receiver position, especially with a Tyreek Hill extension probably coming up. I love JuJu for a lot of reasons. I'm all in on him. I just think he's the perfect fit. He may not be the best receiver out of all the players on this list, but I think he's the perfect fit for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's obviously instantly the best receiver, not named Tyreek Hill, if he comes here. I love JuJu SmithSchuster. I love the idea of him in this offense, and I think we could have a lot of fun with him. I think he would enjoy playing under Tyreek Hill as well, so yep, that's all I got for this video, but I definitely want to hear from you guys in the comments. Which receiver do you guys want in free agency? Did I say the guy that you want in my list? Do you agree with my list? Disagree? Let me know. But all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work on ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. And I will see you all in the next one.